Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Be Unbound podcast. I'm Ben Billups, and this week I'm joined by the 2020 National Student Cabinet President, Mathew Rocke, and we're going to talk about Apex Spark, how it went, and also a little bit about Mathew too. We'll get to know him a little bit because, I would call him, and I think many would agree, he's perhaps the most interesting man in the Unbound community. He's very mysterious. He has a lot of life experience. He's just an interesting guy. So I'm excited to have him on the podcast today. And right before we get into it, I just want to remind you guys, if you know a student who would be the right fit for Unbound, we would love it if you could refer them to us. If you think they're good for the community, they're a good fit for us. If you go to beunbound.us/refer, you can learn about a special offer. So you can generate a unique referral link. You can send it to your friend. They can apply with that link. And if they enroll, then you get free access to our Navigate course and you get free registration to an event of your choice. And that gets into upwards of a $900 value that you get for free if a student that you refer enrolls. And then also the student you refer gets $250 off of their enrollment, which is the best deal that we offer. So if you know someone, could be a friend, could be a sibling, could be the sibling of a friend, then please let them know about us. Let them know about our program. Our spring application deadline is December 18th. So I would encourage you guys not to wait if you know someone. And then also, as we've been talking about the last few weeks, our base camp event is coming up in January. We're going to be focusing on time, tasks, and relationships. It's going to be a life skills intensive where we focus on maximizing basic life skills that just make you better at everything, better as an employee, better as a family member, better at life. And so it's going to be a great event. We're putting everything together right now, and you can go to beunbound.us/basecamp to learn more about that event. With all of that being said, Mathew, as I recall, you and I actually met in person for the first time at the 2018 capstone event that goes with the Signature Leadership courses. And I also understand that was probably your first event. But before that, I'm curious if you were involved online, but in general, just how did you become involved with Unbound and the community?
Yeah, for sure, Ben. Just starting off, though, just thanks so much for having me. It is definitely an honor to be here. So yes, Capstone 2018 was my first student event and a place I met you. I started with Unbound in March of 2017. And no, I was pretty much absent from the community in any way, shape, or form that entire first year I was in the program. A lot of it was just because I was busy with full-time work on top of doing school. I did consider Apex in 2017, and I've heard lots of stories about 2017, so I wish I would have gone, but that's all in retrospect now. Really the introduction to the community was at Capstone in 2018 in Colorado.
Awesome. And so I guess what were your initial impressions or reactions to the community? Or was there somebody that was that brought you in? How did that work?
Yeah, for sure. Well, Capstone 2018 was loaded with just a lot of phenomenal people. And I remember that year I got paired up with Abe Chen as coaching partners, and we did coaching, and so was able to connect with him and then just a number of other really critical pieces to the community. I think if I had to pinpoint to one place or one time at the event, though, where things really kind of hit me in a different way was I had dinner midway through the week with Jonathan Brush. And there's a bunch of other students at that table. And we just started talking about just the uniqueness of the people that were at the event, but then just in the community in general, as I was pretty unaware of what it looked like, what it felt like. And so asked a lot of questions and then heard a lot about, just the amazing places the community had gone and just the type of people that were involved. I think kind of what drew me into it, though, was I was really involved in a lot of small groups and communities at home, a number of different Bible studies. And just at that period of life for me, I was feeling really drained. I felt kind of burned out by those. There wasn't a lot of growth. I wasn't seeing a lot of change, productivity. And then all of a sudden, hitting that week in Colorado at Capstone with a ton of students who had the same vision, the same goal. It just was kind of blew my mind. And that kind of gave me an open door and definitely a very strong willingness to jump in.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then eventually you made your way onto the student cabinet. And obviously 2020 had a lot of change in it. We were planning on having the event and then it was canceled. And then we turned that into regional events and there was all these different things that were happening. And I think one of the reasons why I'm also just comfortable to talk about at this point is because we held 4 regional events and 0 students got COVID. And it's been a few weeks, so I think we can officially call it, from a public health standpoint, huge success, Right. But I'm just kind of curious, like, what were your expectations coming into the cabinet, and just like, what was it like going through this year on the cabinet?
Yeah, for sure. So I think kind of expectations coming into the cabinet were extremely high because I was a part of the 2019 SLI, which was just a phenomenal team, and just thoroughly enjoyed working with all of those individuals. And then, of course, they were going to get retired, the SLI was. And so was really excited about the opportunity to jump on the cabinet. I think going into the cabinet, personally, I really hoped for an opportunity to lead, an opportunity to influence a lot of people. But then from an overall standpoint and just from the event standpoint, I was really hoping to just take the event to a new level. I thought content could be deeper. I thought content, or small groups within the event could just form even better bonds. I really like the idea of community. It actually wasn't my initial, like the thought of having a community themed event never even crossed my mind until we all got together as a cabinet. But I definitely wanted something along that lines. Something, that was just going to be, an extra step that students could take home that was going to challenge them above and beyond what had ever happened at Apex prior.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome. And then I guess, like, I'm just curious to know more specifics about, as the year unfolded, how did you see the team step up? What was it? And just like, was it stressful? Was it exciting? Like, what was the feeling?
Yeah, for sure. I think there was I'm not sure what the best word to use is, but maybe there wasn't a lot of unity, or there just wasn't a lot of chemistry, I guess, is a good way of looking at it. After the cabinet was together last October in San Antonio, we all flew home. I just felt like, man, this is going to be a really rough year because there wasn't that instant connection really among that many people within the team. And I really felt that, especially as the executive for the first few meetings, trying to, it felt a little disjointed. So I definitely was a little bit concerned about how that was going to play out. I think that, yes, and we can get into all the many different changes and things that happened in the year, but I really think those are the things that really allowed us the opportunity to form the bonds that we probably never would have formed, at least from what I could have seen, last October, November, December, when we were really starting to get rolling. And I think, just in terms of some of those changes, like right away at the beginning, I think we found a lot of really good success, which I think gave the team a lot of confidence, which was really good to see. By New Year's of 2020, so first of this year, we felt like we had the entire speaker rotation set, which I was like thoroughly thrilled about. Just some phenomenal people. We were getting wheels running on what we called TIP, which was kind of, if other people have been to Apex, kind of like Currahee or the Blitz games, that kind of idea. The wheels are really starting to turn for something that, I thought was going to be super complex, super engaging, and just take things to a brand new level. But then it felt like January, everything just kind of fell apart. We lost all 3 of those speakers. Like TIP hit brick walls where they had no idea, like creativity was gone.
And if you could explain really quickly, what is TIP?
Yeah, TIP was called the Ignition Project. And of course, Apex was going to be called Apex Ignite. Mm-hmm. And so the Ignition Project, a basic summary of it, it was going to be 4 teams that were competing to win a scholarship that would send an unbound community to the moon. I think that was kind of like the basic summary of it. So it was definitely like there was a lot of really cheesy humor tied into it, which I think kind of came from the personalities within the team. But then there was also this, really fun competition that was weaved into all of that. So that was kind of the nutshell. I wasn't actually on the tip planning team. I kind of just saw it from the top as the executive and heard reports on meetings, but definitely a ton of work went into that. And of course, saw that all kind of just get thrown out when Apex was canceled and we had to shift. But so I think all that early success set up for, just a really hard few months in January, February, March of trying to plow through. And then of course that led to all the changes that happened when we had to cancel.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. And something that, unless you've met Mathew or you came to one of the Spark events, you probably don't have an appreciation for Mathew's unique sense of humor. So before we just keep talking about Apex, I mean, do you have you're pretty quick with these things. Do you have like 2 or 3 jokes that maybe you could tell us right now?
Well, I don't tell jokes. I tell like profound stories. And so I could tell you about the job that I actually just quit at the concrete company because the work just kept getting harder and harder.
Wow.
Yeah. But the other thing too, for you, Ben, have you ever tried archery blindfolded?
That's one thing I haven't tried.
Well, you don't know what you're missing.
That's a good point. That's a great point.
So the other thing, which I think is phenomenal, is the fact that my friend named his dog 5 miles so he could go into work every morning and say, "Today I walked 5 miles."
Wow.
Unfortunately, yesterday he ran over 5 miles.
Good Lord.
So
well,
there you
definitely
go.
Now it's taking a dark turn, so we should probably come back here. So you guys had all these plans. There was a lot of uncertainty, and I know that there was that period of time. I don't remember the exact timeline, but there was a period of time where like there was clearly an ongoing pandemic, and then but like the event was still on theoretically. And I'm sure like, what was that limbo time like where it was like, you don't really know if it's happening? Like, I mean, I'm sure it was difficult to plan because you're like, well, we could plan these things, but we have no idea.
Right. Yeah. I think because when we lost the 3 original speakers that we had in January, kind of went into this whole new search for what are we going to do for speakers. And I remember really the time we started to lock a lot of that up was in the beginning of March, mid-March, when all the pandemic stuff was starting to get rolling. And so even in those few weeks, talking to people, it was kind of like, yeah, we'll be available. So provided we can go anywhere, which just kind of made for, that's an interesting feel, but it didn't really change the mindset until we got into, I would say, early April when, we were seeing more from like a federal or statewide effect of, these bans extending into June or maybe even later than that. And then you started to have, a lot of questions of, well, August isn't that far away. And so what are things going to look like then? So I would say that really, there was a lot of confidence that things were going to, keep moving, even though we didn't have a lot of the answers into, I would say probably the end of May. I'm here in Wisconsin and like all of our stuff, their stay-at-home orders, everything was gone in mid-May. Of course, it all returned in June, but there was a few-week window where you felt freedom. Like it just felt like things were going to start moving back to normal. But once we definitely hit, the whole new set of lockdowns and restrictions in June, especially looking at Michigan, which was way more restricted than Wisconsin, that's definitely where that limbo stage really, you could feel it. You could feel it on the meetings where, there was just this overall feeling of, yeah, we're doing all this work, but how worthwhile is it? Because what are things really going to look like here in a couple of months?
Yeah. That's wild. Yeah. It was this interesting thing. Texas had a similar transition where, there was a shutdown and then there was a moment where things reopened, I believe, or somewhere in May. And then things closed back down a little bit after that. And so even just, I'm sure going through that, you're like, oh, things look good. Things look not good again. And it's like, it's just unpredictable. I hate to say unprecedented because that's such an overused term this year, but that's what it was. Because that's what describes it. But I think, so this happened Apex was canceled, and then 4 regional events were promised. Mm-hmm. And then what? Like, what did the cabinet do at that point?
Right. Yeah. So I think I have like so much credit to give each and every person who was on the cabinet, just with the amount of work that went into, all the speakers that we had been planning for August, but then not just that, like TIP, I don't think like it's possible to humanly comprehend the amount of hours that each person who was a part of TIP put into planning that. And then to see it all just kind of evaporate when everything got canceled. Definitely devastation was a pretty easy word to use and to see in the faces of everyone on the team. And I think what was really the most amazing part though is that you put all the the thought of the time that went into the work from October to July, and then all of a sudden have everything canceled. And then get faced with this task of these 4 new events. I think the level of, energy, the level of commitment just became so apparent. Like it was so much deeper and higher than, even I as the executive saw in all these people who, they just started doing whatever they had to do to find the locations for the events, to figure out how we could coordinate speakers, kind of redevelop small groups, go from, a 5-day platform, to a day and a half, basically, and try to figure out, how can we make these events a taste of Apex when we can't have it, which I think was probably the hardest part. Yeah, we could come up with speakers, we could come up with, food, we could come up with a different strategy for graduation, but how are we going to really accomplish, giving people still that sense of Apex that, was kind of being stripped from us. And I just tons of credit to all the other cabinet members for what they did to step up and I think really achieve that and make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I don't know, it's fascinating. And you talked about small groups earlier and then again just now, but the feedback that I heard was that small groups was like most of the students, it was their favorite part at Apex. So I think that community aspect, the putting, small groups on steroids, like all of that stuff was accomplished, which is phenomenal. And I think just splitting it out into 4 small regional events, being able to kind of monitor on a case-by-case basis each event, and then, looking to follow local protocols and things like that, all of that stuff. I think that's probably the only way Apex could have happened this year. So obviously big hats off to you and the rest of the cabinet for finding a way to adapt everything. And so I guess having been to all 4, I guess what was your perspective on each one? How are they different? How are they similar? And I guess did each event, was it what you expected or was it a little bit different?
Yeah, that's a good question with lots of different parts. So it was really fascinating to be at all 4. Originally, I wasn't supposed to be. I was only going to be at 2, and then I was going to be at 3, and wound up being able to be at all 4. So that was definitely a blessing. I think the biggest thing that jumped out to me is I felt like the culture was different at every single one. And I think that was just kind of by geographical area. In Virginia, it was a lot of people who had interacted or known each other in some way, shape, or form, which I thought was really, a cool. It kind of felt a little bit more like family, just kind of being a part of the event. And then in Indiana, it was a little bit different. People came from a little bit wider geographical area. We had a lot of newer students or people who hadn't been exposed to the community all that long. And then at the same time, we had a couple of people who had, been around for a long time. And I felt like that was kind of the same feel of Colorado as well. And then, of course, Texas is just Texas. So it's just a different, feel in and of itself because you're in Texas. I remember pulling up to the venue there and there's like a bathtub by the patio of the thing and just being like, all right, we are in Texas.
Well, okay. We need to clarify. That place was a little bit more rustic than we expected. Not definitive of the entire state, but I have to jump. I'm native, so I have to say something.
I know.
Yes, it was odd because we're like, well, I guess we have to so we hid the bathtub behind this shed outside. Anyway, it was kind of crazy.
Yeah, it was quite the event and quite the location. But definitely, I felt like the energy was higher in Texas than it was at other locations. And that was really cool to see how, each of the events, they had a little bit of their own culture, but at the same time, you could have gone into any single one of them and you would have known, yeah, this is definitely an Unbound event. Just because of the people, just the camaraderie, the fun, the growth that was going on, the deep conversations. I think small groups were really, just cool to see and just see how they engaged in different ways. Definitely had a few people who were at multiple events, and I talked to some of them about their different small group experiences, and they had the same thing. There were really good things from all the experiences, and learned different things from different groups, and just really amazing to see how people meshed and really just worked together and had a great time over the day and a half that they were there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, so out of the 4 events, or even just from the cabinet, maybe there's multiple answers to this, but do you have any favorite stories or just just big highlights in your mind that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's a tough question because I think we had a cabinet recap meeting after all of these, and there was definitely different people who like different parts, different elements. And I think that was fun. I think Seth Showalter leading Rock, Paper, Scissors, Rock Star in Indiana and Virginia was definitely a highlight for a lot of people. That was a lot of fun. He did a great job with that. I think the graduation ceremonies and all of them were a ton of fun. All of them definitely had their different feel. The impromptu karaoke concert that we got in Texas, I definitely was enjoyed by many people.
Yes.
And the very fast alternating types of music that was played during the dance was also highly entertaining by many people there. And I think just the venues, though, they changed a little bit about the feel and made it really cool. Colorado, I think, was a lot of people's favorite venue to be in. It was on a farm that was designed for Christmas parties and stuff like that. And so there was Christmas trees decorated and lights up and kind of just a little bit more rustic, Colorado feel, and that made for that event just to be really unique in that way. But I think I could probably, if I sat here for a little bit longer, I could think of, tons of specific highlights that were a blast. But there's just a ton coming to mind. Even with the cabinet, there was a lot. There was definitely some pranks that occurred between myself and other cabinet members. I don't know if you recall the icebreaker game we played at a few of the events where a name was placed on the back of an individual, and then they had to go around and ask people which name was on their back. Mm-hmm. And it took Donnie not only the entire night, but also his entire trip home to the Airbnb and 3 wrong turns to finally figure out who he had. And when he did, he was, quite frustrated, if you recall, Ben. And so, that was
absolutely. Well, and it's funny you mentioned that Colorado venue was it was a great venue, but it's the Red Barn's nice and the twinkle lights are nice, but I'm a tech head, and honestly, that sound system was the best sound system we had the whole trip. So I was pretty excited. But it was one of those wireless Sonos ones. You control the volume with the app. I was very excited about that. But carpet ball.
I think the other thing about Colorado is you got to give a lot of kudos for you for keeping all the goats out of the barn, and to make sure that they didn't terrorize the place on that. You're trying to get started Saturday morning. That was definitely a big.
That was something else. Because I just remember we were doing an opening Devo, or there's a prayer, there's something happening. I think maybe it was worship. And we're standing there, and the when you're facing the speaker, the left side of the barn has these giant windows. And I just remember like turning and glancing out the windows, and I see these two goats coming full clip straight for the door, which is open. And there's some poor ranch hand like running behind them, like trying to get them not to come in. And so I rushed the door. Wouldn't have been the first time that I had been in a physical altercation with a goat. So I was ready. But yeah, I rushed to the door. Fortunately, the ranch hand got there in time. They seemed to realize that maybe it wasn't such a great idea to run in there, and we managed to keep them out. But that was definitely a highly entertaining moment. The other thing, I mean, just to keep talking about Colorado for a second, that carpet ball game, I was obsessed. Like, yeah, I'm sure you saw, but I've never seen a game like that before. But for you guys that are listening, it's a little bit like the mini curling, where it's like a long, thin table, but it has these two cubbies on the ends and then pool balls. And essentially what you're doing is you're rolling a cue ball and then trying to knock the pool balls into your opponent's cubby. The person that gets all of the balls in at first is the winner. And then there's all these different rules for if there's a tie, et cetera, et cetera. But I couldn't stop playing it. I was obsessed. So,
I don't think anyone could stop playing it. And then we had that little mini tournament on Saturday afternoon. That was a lot of fun. So yeah, it was that Caleb Brush, I think, won that.
That does not surprise me.
It doesn't. Yeah. He spent a lot of time there over the weekend. So
he's got that hand-eye thing going on. It's surprisingly rare in homeschool circles, but no, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
I think the life-size Dutch Blitz that occurred in Texas and Indiana and Virginia was quite entertaining. I think it was the biggest in Indiana. It got quite the involvement, and that was a lot of fun. I know a lot of people had a lot of fun with that as well.
Yeah. So long story short, guys, if you didn't register for Apex Spark, you missed out. This was I can't imagine Apex ever happening like this again. So everyone who came has that really unique experience to carry into the rest of their time with Unbound and into the community. So, super grateful for the cabinet, super grateful for everyone who came. It was really unique. And I went to all four too, and I had a blast at each one. It was really fun getting to hang out with students, but also just do Apex in like a different way. So I think it was fun, but I'd be curious. I kind of want to circle back and just talk a little bit about and just help the audience get to know you a little bit more. So like right now you're zooming in from Wisconsin. I believe you live there with your family right now, but you've been involved in just like a lot of different businesses. You were in radio for a little while. Like kind of give us a little clue into kind of what you've been up to the last few years.
Yeah, for sure. So I've spent the last 3.5+ years in radio. Radio announcer, Christian radio station, also did some music directing. So I did a lot of music auditions, worked with a number of artists, different concert promotion, stuff like that. And just had a lot of fun. Did that for about 3 years. And then I wanted to get into something a little bit more leadership related. So I wound up leaving the radio station and went into leadership development with Chick-fil-A. Spent a little bit over a year of that, and really enjoyed just the different opportunities and leadership development. It was definitely a really intriguing thing too, because like the leaders I was working with there were primary high school. And so having that compared to helping out with Capstone the last couple of years, it just made for a really interesting combination, because you had people, working, who were just learning the very basic levels of what leadership is, what servant leadership is, what it means to influence others. And then you had the really in-depth conversations that were going on at Capstone or with, students through email or phone calls or whatever. And then wound up leaving Chick-fil-A just prior to when all these Spark events got underway, and have since went back to the radio station where I'm doing some fill-in stuff on a little bit more permanent basis right now, as they're kind of in a transition spot, looking to hire someone. And so helping them out for the season right now. But yeah, that's kind of the main things I've been in. Of course, school. I've also worked in rental management a little bit, did some contracting, and then also have been in woodworking for like 4 years, which was all prior to radio. So yes, a number of different things. But yeah, that's kind of the short list. So.
That's just crazy. But the funny thing is it's like, I won't say it's common for someone to have as much experience in so many different things that you just described. But what you just said is not totally uncommon in the Unbound community. You'll be talking to someone, they're like, oh yeah, I did this, I also did that. And then I worked for a state senator, whatever. It's just like all this random stuff. You're like, how did you? And I think, again, that's just like, I think a lot of people in our community are homeschooled. I think there's a homeschool mentality where you're always kind of taking those opportunities. Same thing with Unbound. There's an Unbound mentality where it's like, well, you have a flexible, you're doing college in a really flexible way. You can allocate your time differently. You get these random opportunities. You can just take them. You don't have to, it's not just a summer internship like you would if you're going to a traditional school. But I guess is that how you found Unbound? Did you have siblings who did it, or was it mostly you're just looking for an affordable degree? I guess what motivated you?
Yeah. So I heard about it through siblings. So I had an older brother who looked into it when it was College Plus way back, 2008 or 2010, something in that time frame. And then kind of lost track of the program. We kind of weren't as involved in the homeschool circles and stuff like that. So it wasn't a common word, especially here in Wisconsin. There's not a ton of Unbound students, definitely some, which is fantastic, but reconnected though when we had a friend join the program in 2016. And so my sister did, and then she had been in it for about a year. And I was thinking, well, this actually makes a whole lot of sense. I had just taken the job in radio. And so I was going to be working quite a bit of hours there, and needed something a little bit more flexible because of the schedule that I had in radio. And this just made a lot of sense because, I had a lot of the Unbound ideals of wanting to stay connected with what I was connected with already. I want to graduate debt free, and a personal goal was try to finish it up in 2 to 3 years. So. And
did you accomplish that goal?
Yeah, 3 years. Yep, I did it.
There you go. Right on, man. Actually, that was kind of a similar goal for me. Is I think I've said this on the podcast a couple of times, but my original plan was to go to law school, so I was just trying to get my undergrad done as fast as humanly possible. And a friend of mine, Christian Matney, kind of came in and just blew through the whole thing in 18 months because he's Christian Matney. If you've ever met him, it makes sense. You're like, oh yeah, that guy would get his degree in 18 months. But so I was like, well, that would be the aggressive goal. I'd like to do that. 2 years is maybe a little more realistic. But then along the way, what happened was I ended up having all of these interesting opportunities. So I would stop doing school for months at a time, just go make movies or do something else. And so ended up taking me about 3 years. So kind of I'm in the same boat, but which is still fast, especially when you consider that average graduation rate is not 4 years. It's more like 6 or 7 if you go to a traditional school. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. When I jumped in, my goal was 22 to 24 months. And then, got opportunities, and it's kind of oh well, I guess this is going to take a little bit longer, but totally worth the experience. So
100%. Well, and then it's just way easier when you get on the other side to find work because you have the experience. So it just makes a lot of sense. But that's super cool. And then also you mentioned doing some music. Some of you guys listening, I'm sure know, but there's the Rocke Brothers music. It's what do you call it? A quartet? If there's 4 of you singing, that's violins, isn't it? Or is it?
Yeah,
okay. A quartet. Well, there you go. I learned something today. But there's 4 of you guys that sing. Are you guys still doing it? Are you going to tour soon, or what's the plan?
Yeah. So I sing with 3 of my brothers. So there's 11 total children in our family. So I have 10 siblings, 6 brothers, 4 sisters. 3 of my brothers and I have been singing together since 2014, more regularly since 2016. So not a whole lot, but we'll do anywhere from 12 to 30 concerts a year generally. Kind of depends on the year. And this year was, of course, much different with a lot of cancellations, but still do it sometimes. We have 4 Christmas concerts coming up next week. It'll be a busy week next week with just a lot of practicing this week and a lot of singing next week. So that's definitely something that came out of our family singing together all of my life growing up. So
Yeah, that's really cool. And you can also find their Instagram, Rocke Brothers Music on Instagram. We'll link it down below if you guys are curious. But Mathew, is there anything else that we should plug of your whatever 18 businesses that you're currently a part of?
No, it is just definitely been an honor to be a part of the 2020 cabinet, and just with all it was a unique year, but just learned so much and was able to work with some really amazing people. And so definitely going to take all the memories and experience with me in the future. So.
Well, thank you guys for listening. And thank you, Mathew, for joining us this week. This has been a really fun conversation. And as always, you guys can email me at podcast@beunbound.us if you have thoughts, ideas, questions, especially ideas for guests. I would love to hear it. And then just like I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, you can go to beunbound.us/refer to get your unique referral link. You can also see the details for the offer and the discount that the student that you refer would get. And then you can go to beunbound.us/basecamp to learn more about the Basecamp event that's coming up in January. So I would highly recommend that if you're thinking about coming to Basecamp, that you would consider registering before the holidays, before everything gets forgotten. And then suddenly before you know it, registration's closed. So go ahead and visit that page, take a look at it. If it sounds interesting to you, highly encourage you to register. And if you have any questions, feel free to email anybody on the team. You can message us on Facebook, or you can send it to podcast@beunbound.us if you want. And we'll make sure that your questions get answered. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Mathew, for joining us. And we will catch you next week.